Welcome to Horses Now, your go-to source for everything in the world of horse racing. Whether you're a seasoned racing fan or new to the track, we've got the insights, stories, and strategies you don't want to miss. I'm your host, T. Gridge, and as always, I'm joined by Kenny McPeek. Kenny, you're back in Kentucky.
I am. I made the road trip from Saratoga this past Sunday. Got back here. I'm at Churchill Downs currently. Me and the big dog are here, and been able to check with my team and the group of horses here, get an eyeball on everybody, and everybody's in good order. So constant battle. And then I've also spent some time down at the Keeneland yearling sale already, although we haven't been active yet.
Okay.
We're waiting for some of the later books, but it's going to be a very busy week.
So I saw where Hip 347 went for $5 million. It was a colt, a Curlin colt. That seems awfully high, Kenny. I mean, can you make your money back on that?
Well, that's a tough one. That colt's going to probably definitely be a stallion prospect because his pedigree is so good. And I didn't see him personally, but I'm sure conformationally he's an exceptional individual. He wouldn't have brought that kind of money. But
right.
That's some people play in that market and they're brave to do so. And I think it's really good for the industry when that happens. I myself bought Curlin for 57. So that's not been my market and not been our angle, but he sure does produce an awful lot of good horses.
So looks like there's been 16 horses as of right now that have gone for 7 figures or higher. Again, I guess the crop's really good.
The market's speaking. I think you're getting some really, really high-end buyers that are looking for top-end pedigrees, and they've obviously seen some things that they liked, and that's what keeps the game going is when those kind of things happen. And a lot of those horses aren't going to work out, but at the same time, that's part of it. And obviously, these horses have great pedigrees and great conformation, and the market said so.
Awesome. All right, Kenny, I want to thank our listeners. We've got a few questions that came in through social. There's a couple I'd like to go ahead and address. One will lead into our broader topic, which is medication use, state vets, and kind of how we keep these horses healthy. But the first question is from George, and George asked, I've only been to the races as a spectator in the grandstands, but I've always heard about the backside. What makes the backside so special, and how does one gain access?
Great question. The backside is a community in itself. Probably one of the most open backside areas in racing is the Keeneland backside because it isn't fenced off, and you can walk around Keeneland and actually walk through the barn area relatively easily.
Okay.
There are different types of backsides. You've got Churchill Downs where I am now. It's quite difficult to get into the backside. You've got to go to the stable gate. You've got to get a trainer to give you permission to get in, or you've got to get someone to get you onto the backside. And then you really need to probably know where you're going. You can't just wander around. These horses are under watchful eye on a regular basis, so they don't want anybody just coming and going as they please. But Keeneland is an interesting place because I actually really like the atmosphere at Keeneland more than any place that I race because it is so open. And Saratoga is a bit like that, but many other racetracks you need a badge or you need a companion or somebody that knows their way around to get in. So it's a little tricky depending on which racetrack you're trying to see.
So Kenny, when I was a kid, one of my dad's really good friends was a trainer by the name of Walter Bender. He was a trainer at Churchill Downs. We were able to get some backside access for the Derby and a couple other type of things, and it's a different atmosphere. It's not like being in the grandstands. It's awesome. Quite honestly, it's really really cool because you're around the horses. It smells different. It looks different. It feels different. Explain that a little bit.
Well, glad you mentioned Walter. I've known Walter 4 decades. Good man.
Great man.
Doesn't play right now, but we'll bump into each other on occasion. But that is the cool thing about the backside is it is the smells of manure.
Yeah.
In many cases of fresh hay, fresh straw, horses, and it really is the charm of the sport. I really think that racetracks should probably be more open about allowing people into the backside, because the day to day and actually touching and feeling horses is really what it's all about. And one of the things we do in our stable is we make a real point to keep an open door policies. For example, if somebody went in on one of our partnerships, the Magdalena Partnerships, then they get complete access to the backside. We make sure that they have the ability to get in, see their horse, spend some time around the staff and the team, and that is really what it's about. It's not just racing and gambling. It's really about the day to day and really getting to know horses, and that's where they all are on the backside.
So that's I'm glad you brought that up, Kenny, because you can go to the website at mcpeakracing.com and you can certainly see what these partnerships look like. And if you want to dip your toe into the horse racing industry, there's ways to do that through your Magdalena partnerships. Talk about that just real quick.
Well, the Magdalena partnerships we call them partnerships kept simple, but you can buy 20% share and be treated as if you own 100. And we put nice groups of people together. Our motto is finding nice horses for nice people. And when you come up with a stakes horse like we have with Torpedo Anna and Mystic Dan, it's great. It's a great experience. And each horse is unique, and we're trying to find the good quality stake horses.
Awesome. All right. Next question is from Bill, and this will lead us into our larger topic for the podcast. Bill said that during the COVID period, there were several incidents of horses dying. Could COVID have caused any of that?
No, I know of no case whatsoever where COVID was transmitted to thoroughbred. That would be completely separate. I'm sure each horse would have an individual reason why something happened, but I'd need more specifics to be able to answer that.
Yeah, gotcha. And so, but you haven't seen where COVID has affected a horse at all?
No correlation whatsoever. COVID did not affect any of the horses in our barn or anyone else's barn that I ever heard of.
Good.
It affected the staff because we had to be masked regularly.
Yeah, sure.
We were tested coming in and out of inside every gate, and the testing was extremely complicated. But we worked hard to try to keep everybody healthy, and there was still a lot of work to do through COVID.
So, do horses develop sicknesses much like humans? Do they get colds? Do they get things like that you have to treat?
Oh, absolutely. You can get horses that get viruses. Sometimes you have a virus that goes through your stable. Sometimes they get lung infections that are bacterial. You have a whole list of different things you've got to worry about. Many of them are vaccinated for different infections. I'm trying to think off the top. East-West encephalitis. We have to regularly pull Coggins tests. We have flu and rhino, which is a really good preventative vaccination. I could go on the different things that we worry about, but herpes virus is another one that's a really big deal if that breaks out in your barn.
Interesting.
But yeah, we're constantly concerning ourselves with the details of making sure that horses are protected from each and every illness that they could catch.
All right, Kenny. So what are the most common medications used to enhance or maintain a racehorse's performance?
Well, the biggest thing we probably deal with is degenerative joints. When the more horses run, the wear and tear, and it's not any different than a person that has a knee issue or a hip issue. Historically, the use of bute and banamine was more aggressive, and you could utilize it right on top of a race. But today, we don't get any of that medication close to a race. There are other bleeder medications that trainers use, Lasix, that we could talk about it extensively if we chose to. And there's also, different types of preventative. Something like Legend is a drug that's used to help keep a horse's joints healthy. And I'm trying to think of some other ones, but mostly there's not that many drugs in racing. Our operation itself doesn't utilize much whatsoever. We actually keep it quite simple. Um, Probably utilize more ice and poultice and try to keep an eye on a horse that has any warm up details, and they're all different. And more than anything, you watch degenerative joint disease, because when a horse starts to have a degenerative joint, then you really got to pay attention to all that.
So, Kenny, we've mentioned Lasix a little bit on previous episodes of this podcast, but let's dive a little bit deeper there. I know it's been a widely debated medication. What are the potential benefits of Lasix, and then the potential risks of using Lasix?
Well, the benefits, and there are those that are firm believers that Lasix prevents bleeding, which is a respiratory. When a horse runs really hard, they can be known to cough up a bit of blood.
Okay.
I myself, and there are trainers that would differ from my opinion. I can't give you 5 horses in my career that were what I call life risking from bleeding. I've always felt like that Lasix was a bit of a drug that we didn't need quite so much of. When I was a claiming trainer, when I was young, there were trainers that were giving 5 to 10 milliliters of Lasix pre-race, and so the negative of that is that it dehydrates a horse. And if anybody out there that's ever taken Lasix, and I actually did it one time to try to get the experience, so I understood what it did to you physically. It drains a lot of water weight off of you. You can, in one case, I took 2 Lasix pills and lost 18 pounds within 4 or 5 hours. So if a horse is losing water weight when they take Lasix, then I think the propensity to, dehydrate is a really big deal. I've always thought that Lasix was more harmful than helpful. And if a horse really was a bad bleeder, the best thing to do was to give a horse time and rest and let them heal up on their own. And then once they got on the other side of that, you bring them back and try them again. And you hope that they're not chronic bleeders. But the dehydration factor, the problem with dehydration in Lasix is when you dehydrated a horse going into the race, in some cases they would lose 20 to 30 pounds of water weight going into a race or coming out of a race. And then subsequently, you've got to get that water back into that horse's system. You've got to rehydrate. Mm-hmm. So there's the cost of the Lasix, there's the dehydration, then you've got to rehydrate. In some cases, you might even have to give that horse fluids to bring that fluid back in, that water weight back in. And I think it makes it harder to run horses back quicker with the Lasix. So for me, that might be more detrimental because I can't run a horse back quickly because I'm going to Lasix and Lasix again, and next thing you know, the horse is extremely dehydrated, and then I can't run, or they run flat. And I think that Lasix, I'm glad Lasix is less prevalent in the sport. We have very few horses that I'm going to say have to have it. We do maintain when a horse is shown the propensity to bleed, we will utilize it in the morning workouts to make sure that they, what I call, cover them up. And then, but I have very few horses in the barn that need that. I think maybe 3 or 4 out of the whole stable right now that we treat when they work. And each horse is different, but it's a controversial topic, and there are those that feel strongly that we should keep Lasix, and there are those that feel strongly we should get rid of it. The interesting place, there are countries that race their graded races medication free, and they race their average horses, or their allowance and maidens and claimers are allowed to use Lasix. I myself like the kind of split system like that. Then you get an idea whether a horse can go from allowance company to stakes company without Lasix. You get a real good idea whether they need it or not.
Okay, Kenny, you've told us the story about taking a couple of the Lasix pills in the past. You gotta give me more on that. Did you know that would be safe? Had you ever heard of a human doing that before? I mean, that seems crazy.
Well, back then the jockeys took it regularly because they had to drop weight in some cases to be able to ride. They use I don't know that Lasix pills are prevalent today because obviously I'm not a jockey, thank goodness. but I know that they use the hot box to sweat out weight.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for riders to try to have to make weight, and Lasix was a way to do it. An old rider friend of mine, JJ Sincere, he said, "Here, try it, see what it does to you." And I was appalled. I couldn't believe how long it took me to recover from it. I tried to run a mile around the racetrack, and I was knocked out completely. I didn't run faster either. I wasn't fast to begin with,
Right.
but I found the effects of it detrimental.
Wow, that's crazy. What a good story there. Okay, so here recently, there was the introduction of the HISA, which is the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. Talk to me about HISA. Has this been a good thing? Has this been a bad thing? I know they're trying to regulate horse racing medications. Has this been a good thing for the industry?
Well, another controversial topic. I myself think it's a good thing for the industry. However, I think we need to align our rules, and the sooner HISA can help align all our rules, the better off we all will be. I think they've taken the position that they're really working to get drugs or illicit drugs out of the sport. They've got a tough job because some states have joined on and some states haven't joined on, and you've got in some cases some threshold levels that have been questionable. That they're able to test on, and there's another entity called HIWU that does the actual testing. And so between the two groups, and they're actually supposed to be independent of each other, they're trying to root out illegal drugs. Well, I myself haven't seen a proliferation of any drugs in my whole career, really. Nobody's ever came to me with anything special that says it can help my horses run faster. I've always felt like that if I keep it simple and I take good care of my horses, they'll run. And I don't think drugs is the answer. However, there are those that believe that we have a real serious drug problem. Um, the the recent metformin positives that have come back, which metformin is a diabetic drug. And metformin, there are several trainers that have been benched because of metformin. There's no reason in the world why anybody would give metformin.
Okay.
I think that HISA and HIWU have kind of tried to tiptoe around trying to figure out how to address those that have come back. I'm going to get real controversial. There's a lot of methamphetamine that have come back.
Mm-hmm.
I had one of them, which was very disturbing. You've got these processes that they've got in place, and mine came back, and then we did a B sample, and then it showed negative, which was a bit of a head scratcher. But these are typically environmental issues, and I think that HISA and HIWU are trying to figure out where's the where do you balance this? How does it equate to people actually cheating, or is it staff that's a diabetic or staff that's excuse the term, a crackhead?
Right.
And so it's really hard for everybody to figure out where we're at. But I think they're going the right direction. I think they're working really hard. I think there are really good, decent people that are running the groups. I think they need to try to figure out how to align themselves maybe a little bit better with horsemen and horsemen's groups, but they're making the effort, and horsemen's groups need to make a better effort at that. But I think overall, I think that the direction they're going can and will be positive for the sport. But I think we've got some work to do and some learning curves, and there's some things that don't make sense that they've put out there from a horseman's perspective. But they're open to listening to all that.
Walk us through how a horse could ever test positive for methamphetamine. How does that happen from the backside?
No idea. Okay, so my particular case happened in Arkansas. I know that there was a rampant issue with meth in Hot Springs, Arkansas. A lot of people that coming and going on the backside, no telling who's using, who's not using. We had one employee that we terminated because he was very erratic behavior. Um, if someone touches the mucous membranes of a thoroughbred and then the horse goes over to run, if they have anything on their hands, they can pick up those drugs.
Got it.
When you've got a public restroom that's only a few feet from the stalls, or it's the only place for anybody, and people are coming and going, there are those that say when they do this, they hide around the corner or they go someplace where nobody can see them. Well, I think if you tested whether it's the walls of the bathroom or some of the tack rooms, so if someone reaches to a doorknob and has been, using, then and then they handle a horse, tie a tongue, put the bridle on, um, could could part of that drug be passed? Obviously, it is. In the metformin, let's say an employee is on the diabetic drug and they urinate in the horse's stall, which infuriates me, by the way.
Yep.
It's just a terrible habit for someone to do that, but people do it, and when they urinate in the stall, then the metformin is in the environment, and then thus the horse eats hay on the ground or spends time in the stall. Can that transfer? That's best guess. I'm not a scientist, but somehow, some way, it's ending up in horse's system in a very, very, very
It has to
small
be
picograms, nanograms.
minute.
But the testing is extreme.
Yeah, so it seems like they need to dial that in a little bit more, because obviously it can't be enough to where it would affect. Now, could you give methamphetamines to a horse to try to make them perform better? Is that something somebody would try to do or not?
I don't know why in the world anybody would do that. I mean, I don't know how the efficacy of that works, but I can't imagine that a horse would respond well to that at all. And I think that the levels that they're testing, like I said, are extremely low. And if it were actually given to a horse, how would you give it,
Right.
and how long would it last?
Right.
And none of it makes much sense. But they're still trying to do their job and to catch these kind of things and get ahead of them. And I think they've been reasonable for the most part. And I was given a bit of advice, and fortunately the B sample came back negative. Like I said, did not understand that at all.
Sure.
But these are the things we have to worry about every day. We have to worry about whether our staff's washing their hands, what kind of habits they are. We have to eliminate people that are dysfunctional. But sometimes you hire a new employee and you don't know what kind of habits they have after hours. Marijuana is another one. I mean, there's plenty of people that smoke it or gummies and or whatever they do. But how do you control what they're doing on their spare time? Very hard.
Kenny, give our listeners a little bit of oversight on what a staff looks like for you, because it's not just at one barn. You've got them pretty much all over the country, right? So you've got a bunch of different people that ultimately are under your umbrella, correct?
Well, mostly I've got top managers, the guys that are running divisions. Greg Geyer here at Churchill's just a charm of a guy, and he stays on top of the people here, and I'm handling the horse details, but he is head coach of all these guys here, girls, and so he'll have a hot walker or groom for every 4 horses, a hot walker for every 5, and typically a rider for every 6 to 8, depending on how busy we are.
Okay.
And so Greg has the freedom to hire and fire the group that he has, and then I've got the Saratoga division, which is still intact. That's where Torpeda is right now.
Yep.
But Dermot and Dermot Magner and Danny Ramsey are both up there, fantastic guys, and they stay on top of that one. But it's different everywhere. And sometimes when you get new horses come in, you've got to hire new staff. And the yearling group down there in Ocala is overseen by Dominic Brennan and Francisco Serrano. But they have to deal with this staff on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And it does fall in their lap to some extent.
Gotcha. Okay. So something you've mentioned quite a bit also on this podcast is how important these veterinarians are. whether it be state vets or whatever they may be. And you've mentioned several of them by name and how good they are at certain things. How do veterinarians and trainers ensure that you guys are on the same page?
Well, there's so many details that we deal with on a daily basis. All the health records have to be kept updated. Um, Coggins, flu and rhino. Um, I could go on and on, all the details that we have to keep track of. But more than anything, we have to worry about soundness. And and you've got your personal veterinarian, which is they'll come in and check our horses. If we think there's a problem, we have them look. Whenever we breeze a horse, we do a jog up. Whenever we run a horse, we have to do a pre-race exam before we run a horse, or even before we enter in some cases. Although I think they've adjusted that recently because sometimes the entries are a week out, and you'll have to get an entry exam. Then you might work a horse the 6th day out, so you need a workout exam. Then you need another pre-race exam prior to the race, and then the state veterinarian on the morning of the race does an exam, and then the post parade they do an exam, and then in some cases, if a horse gets claimed, they do another exam.
Wow!
After the race, so um, there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get a horse to a race. And we don't always agree with the state vets or even sometimes our own veterinarian. I just jogged up a whole list of horses here that I want to make sure that they're moving right. We watched them train this morning. I pulled a few more out. We look at them again. Now, after I've looked at them, the ones that I'm concerned with, I have my vet come back and look again. And then we've got a list of horses that are on the vets list right now. I've got 3 that they put on the vets list because they thought they didn't like the way they moved behind. Several of these horses have had history of a tibia. One had some EPM and actually had a neurological issue when he was young, but he hasn't had it lately. And so they didn't allow us to run in a case. And this is, for me, the biggest problem with racing right now is that how to deal with a horse that's been denied the ability to run, and then the process of getting them back to the races, I think, is a little problematic.
Gotcha.
Let me see if I can try to explain that. So if a horse is scratched, and different states are doing things differently too, which is a little bit frustrating. If a horse is scratched in New York, they could put you on one of 2 lists. They could put you on a 7-day, which means you can run back, work, enter within 7 days without having to jump through any hoops. You don't have to get a regulatory vet there.
Okay.
They're just going to say, we want you to wait, make sure the horse is okay, then you can put back in. Might have our vet look at it ourselves. Obviously, we look at it ourselves, and then you can get back in. In Kentucky and also New York, they can do a 2-week vet off the vets list. So if the horse is scratched on Saturday, the 1st of the month, I can't come back and get off the vets list. I have to get a regulatory vet to look at that horse 2 weeks later. So the 15th of the month. Okay. So the regulatory vet has to observe that horse working. The horse has to work a decent breeze, and then they have to observe the horse cooling out. New York's doing a really good job expediting these details, getting a horse looked at, getting them back going. Kentucky's slow. Kentucky, you have a hard time getting a regulatory vet back in here. We're having a hard time getting horses back off. And here's the one that really bugs me. They draw blood after the workout.
Okay.
And the blood work is to make sure that I didn't give the horse any illicit medication to get it off the list. And they're doing this with every horse that we're working. And we're finding very, very, very few, if any, fines or suspensions from that blood work coming back with a positive or anti-inflammatory or anything like that. So you can't give an anti-inflammatory going into a workout. Mm-hmm. They don't trust us.
Got it.
Which really bothers me.
Yep.
Okay. And if you don't trust us by drawing the blood, then why aren't we seeing more people penalized, fined, suspended for having a positive anti-inflammatory in a workout? Well, it's not happening. So that means that that horse can't run until that blood work comes back.
How long does that take?
And, oh goodness! I mean, sometimes they won't turn them in for several days. Then you've got to wait for the lab to test it. Could be as much as 2 weeks till your blood work comes back.
Wow.
And that horse is unable to start. Now that the regulatory vet would have approved that horse off the list, but the blood work is slowing everything down. And I have a huge problem with that, because if you're not penalizing anybody for those blood works, then you need to turn those quicker.
Yep.
Or eliminate it.
Yep.
Because we're not doing anything illicit. But if you don't trust us, don't penalize the ownership of the horse, the ability to run that horse, in some cases 10 days or 2 weeks. And so the process of turning that blood over, I think, is something that really needs addressed. And New York does a pretty good job. New York turns it pretty quickly. Kentucky is like watching. I mean, it is so slow, and there are a lot of trainers really frustrated with it. It's something that I've mentioned to the head of the racing commission. I've mentioned it to some of the people that are on the rules committee. I'm on the rules committee. I think it's something that needs to be addressed. I think owners should put their foot down, that they should say, you're keeping my horse from running because you don't trust the trainers. Okay, draw blood. And if that blood work comes back with a positive or an anti-inflammatory or something illicit, then fine me and eliminate that horse from purse money. But don't keep all the other horses from being able to run, because it hurts the owner, it hurts the racing office, and people buy. If a horse is found and been looked at by the regulatory vet and they're considered sound, they should be able to enter that day and run within a short period of time without going through the bureaucratic sloth that they put us through.
Man, Kenny, this is interesting. This is a side of your world I never knew existed. I mean,
well, I think they're working through these details. I think that there are people that are listening, but like anything, that they set these things up and then they really don't think about the ramifications, and they don't think about the timing. For every day that a horse does a run, it costs an owner probably a minimum of $100 a day or more to be able to keep that horse in training. The other thing that I'll bring up, okay, if I'm on the vet's list and I have to work once, and then I work once in front of the regulatory vet, and then I'm waiting on blood, I've got to work again, and then I maybe work one more time till I know I'm going to run, then I'm putting more miles on that horse, and I'm taking more risk than if I was allowed to run, because you're going to have to continually work that horse to keep it fit. And so there's some issues that we need to seriously consider some small changes. And I understand the regulators think, okay, they're doing a horse favor by giving them more time and more time, but they're also really making the hardships falling on the owners. It really is.
Kenny, where does somebody like Churchill Downs come into this? Do they have any say or pull or leverage on how things like this work?
Most tracks do have their own in-house veterinarians. Keeneland has a good team. Churchill as well. You have to sign off on some documentation before each meet, and let them know who your barn vet is and things like that. And look, I think that they're really working hard to try to do the right thing. I mean, I know they've lowered breakdowns, but in some cases, I think they maybe have taken it a little too far. Like I said, I think the blood work's too far, but they're trying to do the right thing. I get it; they're doing their job, but there is maybe a little bit better way to approach it. And I'm sure there'll be those that embrace my idea, and I'm sure there'll be those that don't. And but more than anything, we need to fine tune some things and get it so we get it right.
All right, Kenny, last question on this topic here. Do you think there's enough transparency in the way medications are administered and tested in the horse racing industry?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the fact that we have to keep track of everything that we give. If the regulators come into my office we have to show that we have a prescription for anything and everything we have in here. We can have absolutely zero unmarked medications. You have to have who it came from, the vet, an expiration date. If they find anything that you've got in your stable that's not properly marked, it's a suspension. No needles, nothing that is what I call outside the boundary of veterinarians. And nobody's allowed to treat a horse but a veterinarian in my stable anyway. And I'm sure most or a lot of the other trainers in America are the same way. And that needs to continue. I think that's a good thing. And then when a vet treats a horse, you actually have a responsible veterinarian for a horse, and that goes through the HISA rules. I'm the responsible trainer, so my name will be tagged to that horse. Mm-hmm. And then when a horse is sold or transferred, then the responsible trainer and veterinarian will change to the next group. It's a good thing. I think they're doing a good job at it all. It adds a little bit of paperwork to us, but we're not scared of it. We're fine with it.
Kenny, anything else you want to add before we get out of here today?
No, I just think I do think that a lot of our topics are things that we need to open up and discuss with the fan base out there. And I hope those of you out there have I hope it makes you noodle a little bit and think about everything. And we're continually open to people's questions on a lot of these things, and we want to bring the sport to you as opposed to hiding it behind a curtain. There's nothing to hide. It's all everybody, a lot of really good people working really hard, whether you're a trainer, an owner, or regulator, or racing commissioner, grooms, hot walkers, riders. We're all doing everything every day to do the best we can. And when a horse gets injured, no one's more devastated than the people around that horse. And that's something that I think a lot of fans that are new to the game need to understand, that we are pained when it happens. Mm-hmm. And, knock wood, we haven't had anything lately, but every day we wake up and we worry about it.
So if you have any questions that you'd like for us to address on this podcast, please send it through one of our social media channels. Just send us a message. And thank you to Bill and George for sending in questions, and keep them coming, because this is how we bring the horse racing industry to you. Kenny, do we need to thank any of our sponsors today?
Well, absolutely. Phasic Tipton's gave me a torpedo and a shirt. I don't know if you can see it out there, but we're nice. We're really proud of that. And I bought her at Phasic Tipton, and Denali Stud might have to give me a new hat at the Keeneland sale this weekend, but I'll be hitting the Keeneland auction tomorrow morning, and a lot of work there.
All right, Kenny. Well, good luck. That's a wrap for this episode of Horses Now. Thank you for tuning in and riding along with us. If you've enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Hit that little bell or hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Kenny, what's our sign-off?
I'll see you at the races. Actually, I'll see you at the sales.
See you at the sales this week.
All right. Take care.